My wife had an affair with our wedding photographer, and I only found out when she tried to sell our $350, $0 family home out from under me. Turns out, she forged my signature to sign a shady settlement that drained our savings of $150, $0, and now we're headed to court over who owns what. I never saw it coming. One day everything seemed normal. My wife, Lisa, was fussing over her latest makeup obsession, and I was just trying to finish some work emails. But then out of nowhere, I stumbled across something that turned my world upside down. It started with a simple text message on her phone, a number I didn't recognize, but what caught my eye was the name attached. Jason. I thought maybe it was some old friend she forgot to tell me about, but that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I noticed little things. Her phone kept buzzing late at night. She'd disappear into the bathroom for long stretches, and her attitude shifted from loving and attentive to cold and dismissive. She'd snap at me over nothing, roll her eyes when I asked about her day, and suddenly her schedule was filled with meetings or work trips that she refused to discuss in detail. I thought maybe she was stressed, working late, or just tired from the new job she'd started a few months back. But deep down, I sensed something was off. One afternoon, I decided to check her phone again. I knew it was a breach of privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I scrolled through her messages. What I found made my stomach drop. There were dozens of texts exchanged with Jason, flirtatious, intimate, and downright disgusting at times. They talked about meeting up, sneaking around, and even planning secret weekends away. The worst part, she told him she loved him. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built together? I kept reading, trying to process what I was seeing. The messages weren't just harmless flirtation, they were full-blown affairs. I saw plans made to meet in hotels, pictures of her in sexy lingerie, and even a few explicit photos she sent to him, photos I'd never seen before. It was like she was living a double life. I couldn't believe I had missed all the signs, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. My mind was racing and I knew I had to confront her. When I finally confronted Lisa that night, her reaction was interesting. She looked surprised, then annoyed, like I was bothering her. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "You're crazy. You're always accusing me of cheating, but I don't know what you're talking about." I showed her the messages, and her face twisted into a mixture of anger and contempt. "Those are nothing," she spat. "You're reading into things. Jason's just a friend. You're paranoid. You always think I'm having an affair. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of spying, you'd see I'm loyal." I was furious, but I also felt crushed. Her words, her denial, it was like she was trying to gaslight me. I could see the lies in her eyes, the way she deflected and twisted the truth. I wanted to believe she was innocent, but her actions told a different story. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and honestly a little scared. I'd always trusted her, and now I didn't know who she really was. The woman I married was out there secretly screwing around with some guy she met at a damn wedding photographer's studio. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd discovered. My mind kept circling back to the money, how she'd lied about her finances, how she'd manipulated me into signing papers I didn't fully understand. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't even know where to start. How do you fix a marriage when the person you trusted the most has been lying to your face? How do you confront such a betrayal without losing yourself? I felt like I was on the edge of some cliff, and I didn't know if I should jump or try to hold on. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't sleep, and every time I looked at Lisa, I saw a stranger. She kept acting like nothing was wrong, acting like I was overreacting or just imagining things. But I knew better. I had the proof, and I wasn't about to let her brush it aside. I decided I needed to gather more evidence, just to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. I started digging into her phone, her email, her social media accounts, anything I could get my hands on. I wanted to know how long this had been going on, how much she'd lied, and what her plans were. It wasn't long before I uncovered more than I bargained for. There were dozens of texts, photos, and even some bank transfers that she'd hidden. Turns out Lisa had been funneling money to Jason, money I didn't even know she had access to. She forged my signature on a settlement agreement which drained our savings of $150, $0, and put the house at risk. That's right. She forged my signature to sign some shady deal that I'd never agreed to. The house, our family home worth $350, $0, was now in jeopardy because of her greed and betrayal. I felt like I'd been punched again. How could she do this? How could she risk everything we had built for some quick sex with a guy she barely knew? I was furious and hurt, but I also felt a strange numbness settle over me. I decided I had to confront her again face to face and get some straight answers. That night I sat her down in the living room. Her eyes flickered with annoyance as I laid out everything I'd uncovered. I showed her the bank transfers, the forged signature, the texts. Her face turned pale, then flushed with anger. "You're crazy," she snapped, trying to dismiss everything. "That's all just a misunderstanding. Jason's just a friend. You're imagining things. You're paranoid as usual." I didn't buy it. Her excuses were flimsy and her tone was dismissive. "I know about the affair," I said, my voice shaking. "I saw the messages, Lisa. I know you've been lying to me for months. You've been cheating and you forged my signature to screw us over. How could you do this? How could you betray me like this?" Her reaction was pure defiance. "You don't understand," she said, shrugging. "You're just jealous. Jason's not the reason I stayed. I've been unhappy, sure, but I never meant to hurt you. It's just sex, and you're making it into something bigger than it is." That was the moment I realized she was a master manipulator. She was lying through her teeth, trying to make me doubt myself. It was like she was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting, but I knew better. Her lies couldn't hide the truth anymore. I felt a mixture of rage, disappointment, and heartbreak. How did I get here? How did I let this happen? I'd always thought we had a solid marriage, but now I saw it was built on lies and betrayal. I didn't yell or scream that night. Instead, I just sat there processing everything. I knew I had to make a decision. Stay and fight, or walk away and start over. The betrayal ran deep, especially knowing she'd risked our entire future for a fling with some guy. And behind all that was the money, her greed, her lies, her forging my signature. It all came crashing down in one terrible, devastating realization. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I was financially ruined, and I couldn't ignore the fact that she'd used the chaos of her affair to drain our savings and put our home at risk. Now I was left staring at a future that looked uncertain. I'd always been the stable one, the provider, the guy who thought he had it all figured out. Turns out, I'd been living with a woman who was willing to destroy everything for sex and money. I didn't know how to feel anger, sadness, or just numbness. All I knew was I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to figure out what to do next, but deep down, I already knew that moving forward meant confronting her, protecting what was left, and maybe, just maybe, getting revenge for all the lies and damage she'd caused. Over the next few days, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. Every time I looked at Lisa, I saw her differently. Her fake smiles, her dismissive attitude, her constant lies. It was clear she thought she could just brush everything under the rug, act like nothing had happened. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I knew I had to do something, and I knew I had to do it smart. I started consulting a lawyer. I needed to understand what I was up against, especially with that forged signature and the shady settlement she'd signed. It was a mess, and I was furious about how she'd manipulated the situation to drain our savings and put our house at risk. The house was supposed to be our safe place, our future, and now it was on the line because of her greed. I'd worked so hard to build this life, and she'd almost destroyed it for sex and quick cash. The lawyer told me I had a solid case to challenge the forged signature and the settlement. That was a small comfort, but it also made me realize I had to act fast. I couldn't let her keep hiding behind her lies. I decided I needed to get some proof of her affair beyond the texts, something concrete, something that would stand in court if it came to that. So I started secretly recording her phone calls when I could, watching her every move and gathering evidence of her ongoing relationship with Jason. I even hired a private investigator to follow her around. It wasn't just about revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, not just emotionally, but financially as well. She stolen from us, lied about it, and now she was trying to keep everything afloat with more lies. One night I confronted her again. I had all my evidence laid out on the table. I told her I knew about the affair, about the forged signature, about the money she'd hidden. Her face twisted with anger and she started yelling. "You don't understand," she spat. "Jason means nothing. I only slept with him because you were never around, always working or stressed. I was lonely and it was just sex. It doesn't mean anything, you're just overreacting as usual." I looked her straight in the eyes. "That's bullshit," I said. "You're lying. You've been cheating on me for months and you forged my signature to cover your tracks. You don't get to spin this. This isn't just about sex, it's about betrayal, greed, and destroying everything we built. I want a divorce, Lisa, and I want you to pay back every penny you stole from us." She scoffed, her bitchy attitude shining through. "You think you can just throw me out and take everything? You're delusional. You're not going to get anything. I did what I had to do, and if you try to ruin me, I'll ruin you back." Her words were venomous, but I didn't back down. I knew I had to stand my ground. That night, I made a decision. I was going to fight for what was left, our house, our savings, my reputation. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I had enough evidence to take her to court, and I was ready to do whatever it took to expose her lies and recover what she'd stolen. I realized that revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about protecting myself and my future from someone who had betrayed me so ruthlessly. As I sat there, staring at the evidence I'd collected, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger because she betrayed us so badly, and relief because I finally had a way to fight back. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. I'd take her to court, fight for my rights, and make her face the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to let her get away with destroying everything I worked for. Now I had a plan and I was ready to see it through, no matter what it cost. The court date was set about a month after I gathered all my evidence. That month felt like hell. I was constantly on edge, reliving every betrayal, every lie, every moment I realized I'd been played. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep. All I could think about was how she'd managed to manipulate everything: our home, our savings, even my trust. The more I dug, the more I saw how deep her deception went. Lisa, of course, played the victim every chance she got. She threw tantrums, cried about how unfair everything was, and insisted she was doing what she had to do because I'd been absent and not paying attention. She called herself the victim, even as I presented the mountain of evidence against her. Her lawyer tried to spin her lies, but I knew the truth. The forged signatures, the bank transfers, the explicit texts with Jason, all of it told a story she couldn't deny. When the day finally arrived, I felt sick to my stomach but also strangely determined. Sitting in that courtroom, I saw her sitting there, all bitchy and defiant, trying to look innocent. I felt a surge of anger. This wasn't just about money anymore, this was about justice. She tried to destroy us, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. The judge listened carefully as I laid out everything. I presented the evidence, screenshots of the texts, bank statements, the forged documents. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that I was overreacting, that it was just a misunderstanding, that Lisa was a good person who made a mistake. But I knew better. I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd lied and cheated her way through our marriage. Lisa's reaction was classic. She tried to act like the victim, crying, pleading, and even throwing in a few tears about how much she loved me and regretted everything. But I wasn't buying it. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You betrayed me, our marriage, and everything we worked for. You forged my signature, drained our savings, and tried to sell our house out from under me. That's not just a mistake, it's theft and fraud." The judge finally ruled in my favor. She ordered Lisa to pay back the money she stole, annul the shady settlement she signed, and return the house to me. The moment the verdict was read, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Justice, at least in some form, was served. Lisa's face twisted in anger, but she didn't say much. Instead, she stormed out of the courtroom, still trying to look like the victim. Afterward, I sat outside the courthouse, feeling like I'd just survived a war. I had won the case, but I knew the emotional scars wouldn't heal overnight. I was still processing everything, still trying to understand how someone I loved so much could turn into a liar, a thief, and a cheat. But I also felt a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control again. In the days that followed, I moved out of the house. I found a small apartment nearby and started sorting through what was left of our life. The house was still in her name, but I was working with my lawyer to transfer ownership back into my name. I was also filing for divorce, knowing I couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed me so deeply. I had to rebuild piece by piece and figure out what my future looked like without her. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated her. She was a bitchy, manipulative woman who used sex and lies to get what she wanted. She thought she could cheat, steal, and lie her way through life without consequences. But I learned that justice can be slow, but it's worth fighting for. I learned that trusting someone blindly can leave you broken, and that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to take matters into your own hands. Now I'm trying to move on, but I won't forget what she did. I'll never forget the betrayal, the lies, or the way she drained our savings and put everything we built at risk. But I also know I'm stronger than I thought. I'll rebuild my life piece by piece. And if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Never ignore the signs, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to fight back when someone betrays you so completely. Because at the end of the day, justice isn't always served easily, but it's worth every fight. The aftermath of the court ruling was a whirlwind. I thought finally I could breathe again, get my life back on track, but it wasn't that simple. Lisa, of course, refused to go down. Without a fight, she immediately started throwing accusations, trying to spin the story her way. She claimed I had been controlling, jealous, and that I'd fabricated the whole affair to ruin her. Honestly, I didn't care what she said anymore. The evidence was irrefutable, and I'd already gone through enough humiliation to last a lifetime. What really hurt me was how she kept lying, even after everything was exposed. She insisted she was innocent, that Jason was just a friend, that she never meant to hurt me, and that I was just insecure. I had to laugh sometimes. Her version of the truth was so far off from reality it was almost comical. But I stayed calm, knowing that the truth was on my side. I was done fighting her words. I was ready to move on for good this time. The money situation was the most painful part. Despite winning the case, she still managed to cause damage. She refused to pay back the $150, $0 she drained from our joint account, claiming she needed it for emergencies. I knew better. She'd blown most of it on Jason, on trips, on shopping sprees. The house was still technically in her name, and she kept refusing to transfer ownership to me. For a while, I thought about going after her for fraud, but honestly, I was exhausted. I'd already fought so hard, and part of me just wanted to let it go, to start fresh. But I couldn't let her get away with everything. I hired a lawyer to enforce the court's decision and pursue her for the money she owed. It was a slow process, but I was determined. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that she couldn't just lie, cheat, and steal without paying the price. I was tired of feeling like a victim, tired of being manipulated and betrayed. It was time to stand up for myself, even if that meant going after her legally to recover what she'd stolen. Meanwhile, I started looking into places to move. I couldn't stay in that house, not with her still lurking around, trying to manipulate the situation. I found a small apartment nearby, a quiet place where I could start healing. I was determined to rebuild my life piece by piece. I also took steps to protect myself legally, getting a restraining order, changing the locks, and making sure she couldn't interfere with my new arrangements. I wasn't going to let her ruin me completely, not after everything. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. That relief came from knowing I'd fought for what was right, that I'd stood my ground despite her lies and manipulations. I learned the hard way that trusting blindly is dangerous, and that sometimes you have to fight for your own justice. Not easy, and it's not quick, but it's necessary. Looking back, I realize I went through the worst pain I've ever experienced, but I also gained clarity. I saw her for who she really was, selfish, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything for sex and money. I learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to take control, fight back, and refuse to be a victim. I still have scars, but I'm healing. I'm rebuilding my life, and I know now that I'm stronger than I thought I was. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to understand, it's this. Don't ignore the signs. Don't let someone betray you and get away with it. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and fight for what's right. Because in the end, justice might be slow, but it's worth every effort. And you don't have to do it alone. Reach out, get help, and remember, you're stronger than the betrayal. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize how much I've changed. The pain, the betrayal, the endless battles, those have left scars, no doubt. But they've also taught me something crucial. I'm capable of surviving even the worst storms. I never thought I'd get to this point, standing here, feeling a strange mix of relief and resolve. I've lost a lot: trust, money, a marriage I once believed in, but I've gained clarity. Lisa's betrayal didn't just cost me emotionally, it nearly cost me everything we'd worked for. Her greed, her lies, her manipulations. She tried to destroy our life together for sex and quick cash. She forged my signature, drained our savings, and tried to sell the house out from underneath me. That kind of betrayal leaves a mark, but it also makes you realize what truly matters. I learned that I can't rely on anyone but myself, and that sometimes the only way to protect what's yours is to fight for it. I've come to accept that I can't change her and I can't undo what she's done, but I can move forward, rebuild, and make sure that she pays for her actions, legally, financially, and emotionally. The court's decision was just the beginning. I'm still working through the aftermath, sorting out the mess she left behind and trying to piece my life back together. It's not easy, and there are days I feel like giving up. But then I remember the strength it took to stand in that courtroom, to fight for what was right, and to refuse to be broken by her lies. Most importantly, I've learned to trust myself again. I see through her manipulations now, and I'm more cautious about who I let into my life. I don't take trust lightly anymore. I know that betrayal can come from the people you least expect, and that sometimes the biggest enemies are hidden behind a friendly face. But I also know I'm resilient. I survived her treachery, and I'll keep moving forward one step at a time. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts. Gather your evidence. Don't let the betrayal define you, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Justice might be slow, but it's worth fighting for. And even when everything feels lost, remember that you are stronger than the pain, smarter than the lies, and capable of rebuilding from the ashes. Life isn't about avoiding pain, but about learning how to survive it and come out the other side. So here I am, still standing. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'll face it on my own terms. I've learned that betrayal can break you, but it can also make you stronger if you let it. And I've let it. I may have lost a lot, but I've gained something far more valuable: the knowledge that I can survive anything as long as I keep fighting.